I'm going to talk about how God doesn't see as we see. There was a man and his wife. They decided that they were going to go out for the evening. They got dressed up in their best. They called for an Uber. They put the cat out. They got ready to go. Right as Uber pulled up and they opened the door, the cat ran back in. They realized if we leave him in there, he's going to wreak some type of havoc. So the husband went back in to get the cat, and the wife got into the Uber. But the wife didn't want to tell the Uber driver that no one was going to be at the house. So she said, well, he's just running upstairs to tell my mother good night. And so a few minutes later, the husband comes back out. He's breathing kind of heavy. He said, sorry it took so long. The silly old thing was hiding under the bed, and I had to poke her with a broom to get her to come out. Now, just as a warning, don't do that to your mother-in-law. Doesn't turn out well. This morning, we're going to touch on one of the most fantastic stories in the entirety of the Bible. But we're going to move kind of quick because it takes a little bit of setup to get there. The judge Samuel, who hands down was the greatest judge in Israel, had gotten older. He was looking to retire, in essence. He'd appointed his sons, Joel and Abijah, to lead Israel in his place. The only problem was Joel and Abijah were not good people. They were dishonest, they accepted bribes, and the elders of Israel said, we do not want them leading us. We want a king just like all the other nations. Now this is interesting because thousands of years before, Moses wrote down in the book of Deuteronomy 17, he said, one of these days you're going to come and you're going to ask for a king. And here's what you need to do when that happens. You need to find a king that has God's word on his lip every single day. Now, did they listen to that? No, they did not. So in 1 Samuel chapter 9, verses 1 and 2, we kind of get our answer. Now there was a man of Benjamin whose name was Kish, the son of Abiel, the son of Zeror, the son of Bechorath, the son of Aphiah, son of a Benjamite, a valiant, mighty man. He had a son whose name was Saul, a young and handsome man. And there was not a more handsome man than he among the sons of Israel. From his shoulders and up, he was taller than any of the people. So when it's time for a king, God gave them someone who looked like a king. Here was the most handsome man they could find, who was taller than anybody else. And God said, well, here's your king. Now we get to 1 Samuel chapter 12, and now the elders are complaining about the king. And Samuel tells them, in essence, God gave you exactly what you asked for. This is what you wanted. You wanted a king, God gave you a king. In 1 Samuel 15, God rejects Saul. He's not happy with Saul. Saul is not following the commands that God is laying down. So God rejects him as king, and starting in chapter 16, he sends Samuel out to do something about that. So the first 3 verses of 1 Samuel 16. Now the Lord said to Samuel, how long are you going to mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him from being king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go. I will send you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, because I have chosen a king for myself among his sons. But Samuel said, how can I go? When Saul hears about it, he will kill me. But the Lord said, take a heifer with you and say, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. And you shall invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will let you know what you shall do. And you shall anoint for me the one whom I designate to you. God has rejected Saul. He's decided to send Samuel to the house of Jesse. He says one of Jesse's sons, and there's 8 of them, are going to be the king. Now, Jesse is the son of a man named Obed. Obed is the son of a man named Boaz, who we read about in the book of Ruth. So this is unusual. They're about to pick a king, and yet just 2 generations back, there's a Moabite in the bloodline. That's not usual. That is unusual. So Samuel begins to meet the sons of Jesse. Starting in verse 6, it says, when they entered, he looked at Eliab. Eliab is the oldest son, and thought, surely the Lord's anointed is standing before him. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look at his appearance or at the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For God does not see as man sees, since man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. So here's David's oldest brother, Eliab. Again, he's a guy that looks like a king. But God said, that's not him. That's not the right one. And one by one, the 7 brothers of David go before Samuel, and God tells him, no, it's not him. It's not him. Finally, we get to verse 11. Then Samuel said to Jesse, are these all of the boys? And he said, the youngest is still left, but behold, he is tending the sheep. So Samuel said to Jesse, send word and bring him, for we will not take our places at the table until he comes here. Now it's interesting because when Samuel asked, are these all the boys? Some of your versions will say, are these all the children? That word from the Hebrew is hanurim. Now the base of that word is a word called ne'ar. And what those few words are saying, this implies that not only was David the youngest, but he was the smallest and held the least stature in the family. He held the least status in the family. He wasn't thought of. So when Jesse was told, bring all your sons and come, Jesse didn't even think of bringing David. That's how far removed David was from Jesse's thought. David's own father didn't think he was worthy to be among those that were being chosen for the king. He just automatically assumed, well, he's not the one. I mean, I wouldn't pick him as king, right? His father could not see it. Then in verses 12 through 13. So Jesse sent word, and brought him, David, in. Now he was reddish, with beautiful eyes and a handsome appearance. And the Lord said, arise, anoint him, for this is he. So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers. And the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon David from that day forward. And Samuel set out and went to Ramah. So it says he's reddish. Some of your versions will say ruddy. It basically means he has a lighter cast to his skin and a reddish tint to his hair. And basically what that leads us to believe is that David had a pretty striking appearance compared to a lot of the other Jewish boys. He stood out, but not necessarily in the way that would make you think that he looked something like a king. That wasn't the way that people envisioned him. Remember, at this time, he's probably between 15 and 19 years old, still a teenage boy. Then we move into chapter 17. 17 verse 2. Saul and the men of Israel were assembled and camped in the valley of Elah, and they drew up in battle formation to confront the Philistines. The Philistines were standing on the mountain on one side, while Israel was standing on the mountain on the other side, with the valley between them. Then a champion came forward from the army, encampment of the Philistines, named Goliath, from Gath. His height was 6 cubits and a span. So the Philistines and the Israelites are preparing to go to war. The Philistines have come to the valley of Elah. They're standing off on these two mountains with a valley in between, which is normally where they would go down to fight. But instead, they send out a champion. Now, a cubit is 18 inches, and a span is 9 inches. So 6 cubits and a span is 9 foot, 9 inches tall. The blue mark above me is right at 9 feet. I couldn't even put the tape where it was. If Goliath was standing on the stage, he would be leaning like this. It doesn't really look that big until you put it in perspective. I can't even reach his chin. We don't understand how tall 9 feet is. Now, you're going to have people that argue that believe that he was only 6 foot 9 inches. But I think from what we'll study further, that the 9 foot makes more sense. And I'll tell you why in just a minute. Goliath comes out, he challenges anyone in Israel. Fight me one-on-one. If I beat you, then the Israelites will become our slaves. If you beat me, the Philistines will become the Israelites' slaves. That's the bargain. Nobody takes him up on it. Not a single Israelite wants to go out and fight him. In 1 Samuel 17:11, it says, Saul and all of Israel were dismayed and fearful. They didn't want anything to do with this guy. So verses 24 and 25. When all the men of Israel saw the man, Goliath, they fled from him and were fearful, very fearful. And the men of Israel said, Have you seen this man who is coming up? Surely he is coming up to defy Israel. And it will be that the king will make the man who kills him wealthy with great riches, and will give him his daughter and make his father's house free in Israel. So the first part says, everyone is actively running away from Goliath. If he comes down, they scatter. They don't want anybody to think that, hey, I'm stepping up to you. They're running away as fast as they can. And so Saul says, if somebody will fight this guy, I'll make you wealthy, I'll give you one of my daughters to marry, and I'll make your family, your father's house free in Israel. That's no taxes or tributes. You don't have to provide your sons or your supplies when they go to battle. That actually gives you more autonomy than any other family in Israel. And he's desperate. Now notice Saul himself is not offering to go out and fight. He's saying, hey, if somebody else will do this, I'll reward you heavily. Nobody wants to do it. Verses 26 and 27. Then David said to the men who were standing by him, What will be done for the man who kills the Philistine and rids Israel of the disgrace? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he has dared to defy the armies of the living God? The people answered him in agreement with this statement, saying, This is what will be done for the man who kills him. David sees things differently right from the start. He comes in and says, hey, who's this guy that's talking smack about God? Why are we letting him get away with this? And everybody is agreeing with him, but nobody wants to go fight. But David says, who in the world would dare to defy God? That didn't make any sense to him. That was the worst mistake they could make. Who would dare to say those words? And who would dare to stand against an army that's backed by the living God? David doesn't get it. Everyone else there sees a battle that cannot be won. And David just sees a man who's disrespectful and needs to be taken care of. Needs to be punished for what he said. Whenever I read this story as a child, and maybe you guys did the same, did you not always put yourself in the place of David? You were the one with the sling. You were the one that went out and challenged. But if we really get down to the truth, most of us in here, if not all, would be the ones standing back with the Israelites saying, I'm not getting involved in this. I don't want anything to do with it. David is very, very unique in what he sees. He sees things differently. Then verse 28. Now Eliab, his oldest brother, heard him when he spoke to the men. And Eliab's anger burned against David, and he said, Why is it that you have come down? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I myself know your insolence and the wickedness of your heart, for you have come down in order to see the battle. David's brother does not see things the same way David sees them. Now, there could be a part of him that was jealous. Samuel had anointed David king in front of his brother. There could be some jealousy at play. But he accuses David of being prideful, insolent, of wishing for glory for himself and having wickedness of heart. What he tells David in essence is, David, do you know where you should be? You should be with those few sheep that are out in the field. That's where you need to be. You don't need to be here on the battlefield. You've come to watch others fight a battle. You haven't come to fight it. You've just come to watch it. Like his father Jesse, Eliab sees nothing in David. Sees nothing that could help their situation. He's just scornful of him. He feels superior to him. He holds him in contempt because Eliab cannot see it. Jesse didn't see it. Samuel didn't see it. Eliab doesn't see it. But Saul hears about there's somebody that's actually talking about fighting him. So Saul sends for David. In verses 33 through 36, it said, But Saul said to David, You are not able to go against this Philistine to fight him, for you are only a youth, while he has been a warrior since his youth. But David said to Saul, Your servant was tending his father's sheep when a lion or a bear came and took a sheep from the flock. So I went out after it and attacked it and rescued the sheep from its mouth. And when it rose up against me, I grabbed it by its mane and struck it and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. And this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, since he has defied the armies of the living God. So the first word out of Saul's mouth is, You can't do this. No, I'll let you fight him, but you're going to lose. You're not going to win. Saul reacts to David exactly like Samuel did, like Jesse did, like Eliab did. He doesn't see it. He doesn't see that David could do anything about this situation. It goes on and says in verse 38 that Saul tries to dress David in his own armor. It says David can't even walk in it. You can't walk in it. You can't fight in it. David's a youth. He doesn't have his own armor. He hasn't become a warrior yet. Saul can't see it. He's thinking, well, I'll let this kid go fight, but it looks like we're all going to be servants. So then we get to verses 40, and then I skipped 41, 42, and 43. Then he, David, took his staff in his hand and chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook and put them in his shepherd's bag which he had, that is, in his shepherd's pouch. And his sling was in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. When the Philistine looked and saw David, he was contemptuous of him, for he was only a youth and reddish, with a handsome appearance. So the Philistine said to David, Am I a dog, that you come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Now Goliath is big. according to verses 5 through 7 in chapter 17. He's wearing a bronze helmet. He has bronze scale armor. That's little pieces of bronze that are overlapped like fish scales that he's wearing. He has bronze greaves that cover him from his knees to his ankles. He has a bronze saber on his back, and he has a bronze sword. But he's also carrying a massive bronze spear, over 12 foot long. Now, if that's 9 foot, go 3 foot above it. That's why I think 9 foot is probably right, because to handle a 12-foot spear that weighs 35 pounds, you got to be a big dude. That's what he's got on. David, he's got a sling. He's got a shepherd's bag. He's got a shepherd's staff. And he's going out to fight. Now, if you've never been in a fight, that's normally not what you would take. That's just not the things that you would pick. If they were to say, what do you want for the battle? I'll take a staff, a pouch, and a sling. But David goes out with, he's not worried about it. He's not worried about it at all. How do we know that? Because in verses 45 through 47, he speaks. But David said to the Philistine, you came to me with a sword, a spear, and a saber. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I will strike you and remove your head from you. Then I will give the dead bodies of the army of the Philistines this day to the birds of the sky and the wild animals of the earth, so that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that this entire assembly, all the people around him, may know that the Lord does not save by sword or by spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will hand you over to us. Now, most of us know what happens after this. David throws that stone, knocks Goliath out, takes his own sword, cuts his head off, and the Philistines are routed. But that's not really the important part of this lesson. Because here you've had a number of people that have seen no value in David. Jesse couldn't see it. Samuel couldn't see it. His brothers couldn't see it. Saul couldn't see it. Goliath laughed about it. All the assembly of Israel didn't see it. When they saw David walk out there with his staff and his sling, they thought, well, we're going to be slaves to the Philistines. Nobody thought he was going to win. And that's why he says, so that this entire assembly may know that the Lord does not save by sword or spear. David had exactly the weapons that he needed to win the battle. Every single person that was in that field at that time believed the battle was going to be decided by swords and by spears. That's how all the battles. But David said, this battle is already over. This battle's already been won because it's the Lord's, and he's already in charge of it. So now, what is it that we take from this fantastic story? Still one of my favorites in the entire Bible, but there's some very important pieces here that we've overlooked. Number one, don't be surprised when you face opposition to what God has called you to do. You're always going to face someone. When I first began to work, it was first in Christian music, then in churches. I thought, hey, I just treat everybody well, try my best to do God's will, and everything will be great. And that never happened. There was always something standing in the way. But what David teaches the people, and what we learn from it today, is what battles are you involved in today in your life that you should be giving to God? Those battles are already over. He's already decided how they're going to be won, how they're going to be decided. He already knows it. But sometimes we fight when we have no need to, because he's already in control of it. We can find ourselves being led away from the truth. We can find ourselves being tempted by the world. We can find ourselves letting stress and anxiety and fear overcome our thought process. We can find ourselves struggling with any number of temptations that come out of the world. All those battles belong to God. You won't be able to beat it on your own. You must have his help, and he has already won the battle. So let him dictate the victory. Just give it to him, because no one else was going to see that same path. And so who are you going to rely on? Can you see it? Can you see it? You have to make your faith greater than your fear. That's hard to do. You have to make your faith greater than your fear. If you let your fear overcome your faith, you're still in the battle. Samuel told Saul in 1 Samuel 13, God's taking the kingdom away from you. He is going to give it to somebody who has a heart like his. That's why we call David the man after God's own heart. David could see things the way that God saw them. He didn't look at the world the same way. God saw in David something he could see in no one else. And David saw in situations results that nobody else could see, because they both had a special way of looking at things. God said, don't judge by outside appearances. Judge by the heart. Judge by what a person does. We can't see things through God's eyes, but we can look the way he asks us to. We can try to see things the way he wants us to see them. David was the only person on that field who looked at Goliath and said, oh yeah, I got this. This is not even going to be a competition. It'd be like Shaq taking on a 4-year-old. This battle's decided. David said, I've got this. God's going to give this to me. He had no doubt about it. But he wasn't relying on what his eyes were telling him. Because if he would have looked at it just from the outward perspective, that's a big dude. That's a big, strong dude. He's got a lot of weapons. He's got a lot of protection from my weapons. But God had already given him exactly what he needed. So what battles are you relying on that God has already declared to be over? The first thing is, don't try to be someone you're not. God is going to use you as you are, and he'll give you what you need to succeed. David didn't have to go out and find extra armor or extra swords. He took what God had already taught him to use, and he brought victory through those things. God brought the victory through him. So don't try to be what you are not. Let God mold you into who he needs you to be. But to do that, we have to see the way that he does. There's too few of us that try to see as God sees. The rest of us just see as the world does. And the world is blind. The world bases itself around fear and despair. But God is the one who determines our victories. He's the one that gives those to us. And so your faith brings courage. Your faith can overcome your fear, because the more faith you have, the more courage he gives you. David wasn't a bit afraid. He went out there, even when Goliath taunted him, he said, look, in just a minute, I'm going to knock you out with this. I'm going to kill you with your own sword. And then I'm going to run after all those people on that hill, and I'm going to take care of them too. And nobody believed him until about a minute later, when all of a sudden, how they viewed the world stop dead. Sometimes that's what it takes for us, that we allow our faith in God to bring us courage. And so what fears, what battles, what are the things that you need to give to God today? Can you see the way He does? This morning we have an invitation time. If you need some help with that, this is the time to come forward and ask for that help. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make His face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift His countenance upon you and give you peace. Let's all stand together and sing.